last days of joy. In the heart of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, nestled within the rolling hills and fertile valleys, lay the village of Hartenberg. It was a place where the sun seemed to shine a little brighter, and the laughter of children was a constant melody that filled the air. Among these children was young Eldur, a boy of 10 years, with a mop of unruly dark hair and eyes that sparkled with curiosity and joy. Eldur's family was not wealthy, but their home was rich with love and warmth. His father, Hans, was a blacksmith, whose strength was matched only by his kindness. His mother, Ingrid, was the heart of the household, her gentle hands always busy with the chores that kept their small home running smoothly. Eldur had a younger sister, Greta, whose giggles were a source of endless delight to him. Together, they formed a close-knit family that faced the world with smiles and songs. Life in Hardenberg was simple but fulfilling. Eldur spent his days helping his father in the forge, playing in the fields with his friends, and exploring the nearby woods. The villagers often gathered for festivals, where music and dancing lit up the night, and the bonds of community grew stronger with each passing year. The storm of chaos, but the idyllic peace of Hartenberg was shattered one fateful evening. The village lay quiet under a sky painted with the colours of dusk when the tranquility was broken by the distant sound of hooves thundering against the earth. The villagers looked up, alarmed, as the dreaded Black Company, a notorious band of marauding bandits known for their brutality, descended upon them. The Black Company, led by the ruthless Wolfheart, showed no mercy. They swept through Hartenberg like a storm, their swords gleaming in the firelight as they set homes ablaze. Hans tried to defend his family, but was cut down before Eldur's eyes. Ingrid, clutching Greta, was struck down as she tried to shield her daughter. Eldur could do nothing but watch in horror as his world was torn apart. The bandits rounded up the surviving children, including Eldur, and bound them with rough ropes. The air was thick with smoke and the cries of the dying. Eldur was dragged away, his heart breaking with each step as he left behind the only life he had ever known. Chains of despair. The next few years of Eldur's life were a blur of pain and suffering. The Black Company treated their captives with cruelty, using the children for hard labor and punishing them severely for the slightest infraction. Eldur, small but resilient, endured beatings and back-breaking work. The bandits forced him to carry heavy loads, clean their camps, and perform other menial tasks. The once cheerful boy became hardened by his experiences. The bandits saw him as nothing more than property, to be used and discarded at will. Eldur's spirit, however, remained unbroken. He clung to the memories of his family and the happier times in Hartenberg, finding strength in his determination to survive. As Eldur grew older, his tasks became more demanding. He was often punished for defiance, the bandits seeing his resilience as a challenge to their authority. Despite the constant mistreatment, Eldur's resolve only grew stronger. He learned to endure the pain, to bide his time, and to never lose hope. The auction block. At 16, Eldur's fate took another dark turn. The Black Company, needing to fund their ongoing raids, decided to sell some of their captives. Eldur was among those selected to be auctioned off. He was taken to a bustling market, chained and displayed like livestock. The humiliation was immense, but Eldur's eyes remained defiant, his heart steeled by years of suffering. The auction was a cacophony of shouts and bids. Eldur stood on the block, his body marked by scars from years of beatings. As potential buyers examined him, he felt a surge of anger and determination. He swore to himself that he would find a way to escape this life, to break free from the chains that bound him. A glimmer of hope. As the auction progressed, a regiment of soldiers passed by, their uniforms a stark contrast to the grim reality of the market. Eldur watched them with a mix of envy and hope, when one of the soldiers, a kind-faced young man, noticed the defiance in Eldur's eyes. He paused. A brief exchange of glances between the soldier and his superior resulted in a hasty decision. Eldur was purchased by the regiment, his chains removed, and his future, though uncertain, suddenly seemed brighter. Eldur was taken in by the soldiers, who offered him a place among their ranks. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of hope. Though he was still haunted by his past and the loss of his family, Eldur saw a chance for a new beginning. He vowed to honor the memory of those he had lost by becoming a soldier they would be proud of, by rising above the pain and forging a new path forward. Brotherhood and betrayal. The Order of St. George. Eldur was taken in by the Order of St. George, a renowned regiment within the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation. The regiment was known for its valor and discipline, often called upon to protect the empire's borders from external threats. Eldur, though new to the life of a soldier, quickly proved himself to be strong, brave, and determined. His years of suffering had forged him into a resilient young man, and he excelled in his duties. Eldur's dedication did not go unnoticed. He earned the respect of his comrades and superior officers through his tireless work ethic and unyielding spirit. Among his fellow soldiers, he found a new family. There was Dietrich, the seasoned veteran with a hearty laugh, Wilhelm, the sharpshooter with a quick wit, and Franz, the gentle giant who could lift a barrel of ale as easily as a feather. Together, they formed an inseparable bond, becoming brothers in arms. The camaraderie within the Order of St. George was a source of immense joy for Eldur. Evenings were spent around campfires, sharing stories of home, dreams for the future, and the occasional bawdy joke. Eldur, once a lonely orphan, now felt the warmth of friendship and loyalty. The soldiers would often gather at the local tavern, raising their mugs in toasts and reveling in each other's company. The laughter and camaraderie were a balm for Eldur's wounded soul. These moments of happiness were a stark contrast to the hardship he had endured. For the first time since the loss of his family, Eldur felt a sense of belonging. He cherished these bonds, knowing that his comrades were more than just fellow soldiers. They were his new family. In the summer of 1683, the Order of St. George was called upon to defend the empire against a formidable foe. The Ottoman Empire, led by Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa, had laid siege to Vienna, a battle that would determine the fate of thousands and the stability of the region. The stakes were incredibly high, and the soldiers knew that their courage and skill were all that stood between their homeland and devastation. As the battle commenced, Eldur fought with a ferocity that surprised even him. He moved through the chaos with precision, his training and determination driving him forward. Beside him, Dietrich, Wilhelm, and Franz fought valiantly, their bond giving them strength. The battlefield was a maelstrom of clashing swords, flying arrows, and booming cannons. The air was thick with the cries of the wounded and the dying. Despite their bravery, the forces of the Holy Roman Empire were overwhelmed. The Ottomans, with their superior numbers and strategic advantage, pushed forward relentlessly. Eldur watched in horror as his comrades were cut down one by one. Dietrich fell, his laughter silenced forever. Wilhelm, struck by an arrow, crumpled to the ground. Franz, his great strength failing him, was overrun by enemy soldiers. Eldur fought desperately to protect his fallen brothers, but it was in vain. Retreat and shame. the order to retreat was given, and the surviving soldiers of the Order of St. George fled the battlefield. Eldur, his heart heavy with grief and guilt, followed. The retreating soldiers returned to their homes, but they were not welcomed as survivors. Instead, they were shunned and shamed, labeled as cowards and traitors. The villagers, desperate for someone to blame, directed their anger at the defeated soldiers. Eldur, once a respected member of his regiment, now found himself ostracized. The bonds of brotherhood that had sustained him were shattered, leaving him to face the scorn of those who had once looked up to him. Life became unbearable. Eldur, now a beggar on the streets, endured harsh winters and the cruel whispers of those who saw him as a failure. The shame of defeat and the loss of his comrades weighed heavily on his soul. He wandered aimlessly, haunted by the memories of the battlefield and the faces of the friends he had lost. The pain of his past and the burden of his present left Eldur a shadow of the man he once was. Yet, in the darkest hours of his despair, a new chapter of his life awaited, one that would transform him in ways he could never have imagined. A glimmer of compassion, Eldur, now a shadow of his former self, wandered the streets begging for scraps. His once strong frame was now frail, and his eyes, once filled with determination, were hollow. He had lost all hope, until a kind-hearted woman named Annika took pity on him. Annika's brother had also fought and lost his life in the battle against the Ottoman Empire. She saw in Eldur a reflection of her own grief, and offered him food and kindness when no one else would. Day after day, Annika visited Eldur, bringing him warm meals and tending to his wounds. Slowly, the walls Eldur had built around his heart began to crumble. Annika's compassion and understanding rekindled a small spark of hope within him. They spent hours talking about their shared losses, finding solace in each other's company. Eldur, who had sworn never to form another bond, found himself falling in love. With Annika's encouragement, Eldur began to rebuild his life. They moved to an isolated part of the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, far from the prying eyes and cruel whispers of the townsfolk. They lived in a small, humble shack, but their love and happiness made it feel like a palace. For the first time in years, Eldur felt truly at peace. Their days were filled with simple joys, tending to a small garden, sharing meals by the fire, and dreaming of a future together. Annika's laughter became the music of Eldur's life, and her presence a balm for his soul. Their love was a quiet, powerful force that seemed to heal the wounds of their past. When Annika discovered she was pregnant, their joy knew no bounds. They eagerly prepared for the arrival of their child, imagining the life they would build together as a family. Eldur, who had lost so much, felt blessed by the prospect of new beginnings. However, fate dealt Eldur another cruel blow. During childbirth, complications arose, and despite Eldur's desperate efforts, Annika and their newborn child both died. Eldur's heart shattered once more, the weight of his grief almost too much to bear. He buried them in a quiet spot near their home, marking the graves with simple wooden crosses. In the days that followed, Eldur was consumed by his sorrow. He stayed in their small shack, swearing never to befriend another person. The pain of losing Annika and their child was a wound too deep to heal. He grew bitter and reclusive, avoiding any contact with the outside world. As the years passed, Eldur's isolation only deepened. His home was often robbed by strangers, taking advantage of his age and frailty. He was no longer able to defend himself as he once had. The once strong and brave soldier had become a weak old man, shunned and feared by the people who called him a witch and evil. On the rare occasions Eldur ventured into town for supplies, he was met with hostility. People stared, spat at him, and called him names. They avoided his gaze, whispering that he had the evil eye. The townsfolk's cruelty cut deep, reinforcing Eldur's resolve to remain isolated. He felt like a ghost, a relic of a past that no one wanted to remember. Eldur's life became a cycle of pain and bitterness. He kept to himself, his heart hardened by loss and betrayal. The small shack, once filled with love and laughter, now stood as a monument to his suffering. Eldur had become a man haunted by his past, unable to find peace or solace in the present. As he grew older, he resigned himself to a life of loneliness, believing that happiness and companionship were no longer within his reach. The accusation. It was a cold, lonely evening in Eldur's small shack. The fire crackled weakly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Eldur sat in his worn chair, staring into the flames, lost in memories of a time long past. The quiet was suddenly shattered by the violent crash of his door being kicked open. Eldur turned sharply to see a group of men from the village, their faces twisted with anger and fear. "You!" one of them shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Eldur. "You're the one who's brought this curse upon us. You're the reason our children are sick." Eldur, frail and hunched with age, looked up at them with weary eyes. "I've done nothing to harm you," he said calmly. "I am but an old man, alone in my misery." "Liar," another man spat, holding up a length of rope. "We know your kind. You're a witch, a bringer of evil. If you want to save this village, you'll hang yourself tonight." The men advanced on Eldur, their intentions clear. He felt a surge of fear and anger well up inside him. They grabbed him roughly, trying to force the rope around his neck. The firelight reflected off their wild eyes, casting grotesque shadows on their faces. "I have nothing to do with your sickness," Eldur repeated, his voice growing firmer. But the men did not listen. They struck him, blows landing hard on his frail body. The pain reignited something deep within Eldur, a fire that had not been extinguished by years of suffering. Suddenly, with a strength that defied his age, Eldur fought back. He knocked one of the men to the ground and delivered a blow to another, who staggered back in shock. The villagers were momentarily stunned. How could this old, frail man possess such power? "Stop!" one of the men cried, fear creeping into his voice. "He's possessed!" Eldur stood tall, his eyes blazing with an intensity that seemed otherworldly. "I have seen pain all my life, from when I was a boy," he growled. "I am used to it. Bring me more. I want it." With a feral roar, Eldur lunged at them like a crazed animal. The men, terrified by this sudden transformation, scrambled to get away. They fled from the shack, shouting in fear. "He's mad! He's possessed!" Their cries echoed into the night as they ran. As the last of the men disappeared into the darkness, Eldur stood alone in the doorway, his chest heaving. The adrenaline that had fueled his fierce resistance drained away, leaving him weak and trembling. He staggered back inside and collapsed onto the floor, the room spinning around him. The small fire continued to burn, its light now casting long shadows over Eldur's prone form. He lay there, staring at the ceiling, a mixture of triumph and despair flooding his mind. He had defended himself, shown strength he thought long gone, but at what cost? He had fought off his tormentors, but his body was failing him. Eldur's thoughts drifted to Annika and their unborn child, to his lost comrades and the family he once had. Tears filled his eyes as he lay on the cold, hard floor, surrounded by the remnants of his shattered life. He had fought for survival his entire life, but now, as darkness began to close in, he wondered if he had the strength to continue. The fire crackled on, the only sound in the silence of the night, as Eldur slipped into unconsciousness, his body and spirit battered, but not broken. Eldur lay motionless on the cold floor of his shack, the remnants of the struggle still fresh in his mind. He drifted in and out of consciousness, the world around him a haze of pain and memories. Through the fog, a voice pierced the darkness. "Hello there," the voice said, soft but firm. Eldur tried to lift himself, but his body failed him. He managed to turn his head, squinting through the dim light, to see a figure approaching. The voice spoke again, calm and reassuring. "It's okay, Eldur. I am a doctor, not one of them. Let me help you." Eldur spat back, his voice hoarse with defiance. "No, I do not need help. I enjoy the pain." The figure knelt beside him, revealing a kind face framed by dark hair. "Good. That is what I wanted to hear, but I must insist." The man gently lifted Eldur and began to bandage his wounds. With practiced ease, he brought a hot drink to Eldur's lips, the warmth seeping into his weary bones. Eldur, too weak to resist, allowed the man to help him. "I am Dr. Thorne," the man introduced himself. "Tell me, Eldur, why carry on? Why not just give up? There is no shame in quitting. Many more powerful than you have. Why keep going?" Eldur's eyes, though filled with pain, held a spark of determination. "My father was a blacksmith," he began. "He used to blister steel, heating it until it was red hot, then hammering it into shape. He always said that the steel was weak until the final phase, when it became strong and hard. That was its reward for enduring the process." Eldur paused, his voice gaining strength. "I see myself as the steel. The pain of life is my blister. Like steel, the more we endure, the stronger we get. My father told me that steel is weak until it faces the final trial. I feel my reward is coming. I just need to pay more in pain." Dr. Thorne listened intently, his eyes never leaving Eldur's. When Eldur finished, Thorne nodded. "You have paid your dues, Eldur, and now is the time to become as strong and hard as steel. But answer me one more question. If you could have this life over, would you live it any different?" Eldur's response was immediate. "No. To do so would make me weak. If I were to do this again and be as strong as the steel my father forged, I would cut down anyone and everyone in my way." Dr. Thorne's eyes lit up, a smile spreading across his face. "Then prepare to be the sword of your vengeance, Eldur." Before Eldur could react, Dr. Thorne's face transformed, his fangs elongating. He burst through the shadows, moving with supernatural speed. Eldur felt the doctor's fangs sink deep into his neck, a sharp pain followed by a strange numbness. His vision blurred, and the room spun around him. He tried to fight, but his strength was no match for the vampire. Eldur collapsed, his body lifeless. Darkness closed in, and he felt a cold emptiness where his pain had once been. But deep within that darkness, a new fire ignited, a fire that promised power and vengeance. Eldur's journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. Eldur's eyes slowly opened, the room coming into focus. He was lying on the floor of his shack, but the pain that had plagued him for years was gone. Dr. Thorne was seated beside him, watching intently. "That was quick," Dr. Thorne said, a hint of admiration in his voice. "It normally takes days?" Eldur stood up, surprised at how easy it was. He felt a surge of strength, his muscles taut and powerful. He marveled at his newfound vitality, but when he looked at his hands, he noticed that they had aged. the skin leathery and ancient.
"What have you done to me?"
Eldur demanded, a mixture of awe and fear in his voice. Dr. Thorne stood, his expression calm and composed.
"I have watched you, Eldur, from that moment when the bandits raided your camp. I saw you forced to work half to death in their camp, sold at auction, fighting in battle, begging on the streets. I was there when your family perished and when you grew old and bitter. I knew you would become an elder, one of us, but we can only be born through pain and suffering."
Eldur's mind reeled as he processed Thorne's words. The memories of his suffering, his losses, and his relentless struggle flashed through his mind. The realization dawned on him. He had been chosen for something greater, something darker. Dr. Thorne continued, "Now, you must feed to regain your strength." Eldur walked to the small cupboard and opened it, instinctively searching for food. But Dr. Thorne laughed, a deep, knowing sound. "That type of food is no longer for you," Thorne said. "Come, it is time to unsheathe your steel and become the bringer of vengeance."
"Embracing the darkness."
Eldur looked at Dr. Thorne, a newfound understanding within him. He knew what he must do. The fire of vengeance that had burned within him for so long now had a purpose. The pain and suffering he had endured were not in vain. They had forged him into something powerful, something deadly. As they stepped out into the night, Eldur felt an exhilarating sense of freedom and purpose. The world, once a place of suffering and loss, now seemed ripe for the vengeance he would unleash upon it. Dr. Thorne guided him through the darkness, a mentor in the ways of their kind. They moved through the village with supernatural speed and stealth. Eldur's senses were heightened. He could hear the heartbeat of every living creature, smell the blood coursing through their veins. Hunger gnawed at him, a primal urge that demanded satisfaction. Dr. Thorne led him to a secluded spot where a lone traveler was making camp. The man was oblivious to their presence, humming softly to himself. Eldur's instincts took over, and before he knew it, he had descended upon the man, his fangs sinking into the soft flesh of the traveler's neck. The rush of blood filled Eldur with a strength and clarity he had never known. As the life drained from the man, Eldur felt a surge of power, a completeness that was intoxicating, the sword of vengeance. Dr. Thorne watched, a satisfied smile on his face.
"Now, Eldur, you are truly reborn. You are the sword of your vengeance. Use your strength to cut down those who have wronged you and those who bring suffering to others."
Eldur nodded, wiping the blood from his lips. He felt no remorse, only a cold determination. The pain he had endured had shaped him into a weapon, and now it was time to wield that weapon against the world, the harbinger of death. As Eldur and Dr. Thorne began to move back to Eldur's small shack, a sudden realization struck Eldur. He stopped abruptly, a fierce determination lighting up his eyes. "Wait," he said, his voice carrying a new authority.
"This is not enough for them."
With a predatory grace, Eldur merged with the shadows and moved towards the town. Dr. Thorne watched, a knowing smile playing on his lips. Eldur's form seemed to melt into the darkness as he approached a group of young men gathered in the street. Without hesitation, Eldur descended upon them like a harbinger of death. The men's laughter turned to screams of fear and terror as Eldur's fangs found their throats, drinking deeply of their crimson liquid. The warm blood invigorated him, each drop a testament to his newfound power. Eldur's cries echoed through the night. "More! he demanded. "I want more," Dr. Thorne observed from the shadows, his satisfaction complete. His job was done, his faith in Eldur's potential fulfilled. He merged with the shadows and disappeared from Eldur's life forever, leaving his creation to wreak havoc and seek his own path. A new purpose. Months passed, and Eldur had made his way to Vienna. The city, once a symbol of his greatest failure, now became the stage for his vengeance. Eldur targeted leaders and high-ranking officers, the very people who had once shunned him and blamed him for their losses. He moved through the city like a ghost, his presence felt only in the aftermath of his deadly visits. Each night, Eldur sought out his targets, cutting them down with the precision of a sword of hardened steel. He relished the fear in their eyes, the final moments of their lives as they realized the predator that had come for them. Vienna's elite fell one by one, their blood nourishing Eldur's growing power. Eldur's actions did not go unnoticed. Whispers of a vengeful spirit spread through the city, a dark avenger who struck without warning. The people of Vienna lived in fear, knowing that no amount of guards or fortifications could protect them from the shadowy menace. Eldur embraced his role, seeing himself as the sword of vengeance, forged in the fires of his suffering and now unleashed upon those who had wronged him. He moved with a purpose, his every action driven by the pain of his past and the promise of retribution. One night, Eldur stood atop a high tower, looking out over the city of Vienna. The moon cast a pale light on the streets below, where panic and fear had taken root. Eldur felt a sense of grim satisfaction. He had become what his father had always spoken of, a piece of steel, hardened and strong, ready to cut down anything in its path. But with each life he took, Eldur felt a growing emptiness. The vengeance that had driven him was beginning to lose its edge, replaced by a cold, hollow feeling. The faces of those he had lost haunted his dreams, their voices calling out to him from the depths of his soul. He had gained power, but at a cost that weighed heavily on his heart. Eldur knew that his journey was far from over. He had embraced the darkness, but now he needed to find a new purpose, something beyond the endless cycle of vengeance. As he looked out over the city, he vowed to find that purpose, to use his strength for something greater than his own pain. The path ahead was uncertain, but Eldur was ready to face it. He had been forged in the fires of suffering, and now, as a creature of the night, he would carve out his destiny with the same determination that had carried him through his darkest days. The steel of his spirit was strong, and he would wield it with the precision and power of a true warrior. Return to the past. Eldur returned to the now abandoned shack where his wife and child had perished many years ago. The small, decrepit structure stood as a testament to his past sorrows. He approached the graves, marked by simple wooden crosses, where he had buried his loved ones. The rain fell in heavy sheets, soaking the ground and blurring the line between earth and sky. He stood over the ground, his heart heavy with memories. "If you could see me now, you would be proud of me." He spoke to the silent graves. "I am the steel that cuts down those who deserve their punishment. My powers are beyond anything the world has seen." Eldur collapsed to the ground, clutching the soil in his hands. "But even with all my power, I can do nothing to fill the emptiness within me, the void created by your loss." He looked up to the skies, his voice breaking with anguish. "Damn you, God! Damn you for taking them from me!" His words echoed in the night, carried away by the howling wind. As he settled, his voice grew calmer. "Maybe one day I will find another like me, who understands my pain. Maybe then the void can be filled, but until that day, they will suffer. Oh, how they will suffer. At that moment, a voice spoke from behind him, soft yet powerful. "Be at peace, my child. Every elder must endure the pain. That is our payment for this gift." Eldur turned to see an imposing figure standing in the dark and rain. The man radiated an aura of ancient wisdom and power. "I am the sage," the figure continued. "There are others like us. I have a council of elders. You are welcome there. Join your kind. Join the council." Eldur looked at the sage, a mixture of curiosity and defiance in his eyes. "I have much to do, sage. Maybe I will join you when I am sated, but that day is not today." The sage nodded, understanding and patience in his gaze. "Seek me out when you are ready, Eldur. My son, your place is with us." With those words, the sage disappeared into the shadows, leaving Eldur alone once more. Eldur stood up, the rain lashing down upon him, mixing with the soil and dirt covering his hands. He looked down at the graves of his loved ones, a renewed sense of purpose filling his heart. "I will seek you out, sage," he murmured. "But first, my steel must be tested. I must become the vengeance of my past. I must redeem my pain, and I feel this will take a long time." A dark smile spread across Eldur's face as he turned away from the graves and began walking back towards the town. "I also think," he said to himself, "I'm going to enjoy this." With each step, Eldur felt the weight of his past lift slightly, replaced by the grim satisfaction of the vengeance to come. The rain continued to pour, but he no longer felt its chill. His path was clear, his resolve unshakable. Eldur was ready to embrace his destiny, to become the sword of vengeance that would carve out justice in a world that had shown him no mercy. And so, with the fire of purpose burning in his heart, Eldur set out into the night, determined to fulfill the promise he had made to himself and to the memories of those he had lost. The world would know his name, and through his actions, he would find the redemption and peace he so desperately sought. Eldur walked the dark path of vengeance with unwavering determination, a lone figure cutting through the shadows of a world that had wronged him. His power grew with each life he took, each act of retribution a testament to his pain and the strength it had forged within him. Yet, despite the satisfaction he found in his vengeance, an emptiness lingered, a void that no amount of bloodshed could fill. As he moved from town to town, exacting his form of justice, Eldur often found himself reflecting on the words of the sage. He wondered if there truly were others like him, others who had been forged in the fires of pain and loss. He questioned whether any of them could understand the depth of his suffering, the loneliness that gnawed at his soul. Unbeknownst to Eldur, his fate was intertwined with another's, a kindred spirit on a similar path of darkness and vengeance. In a distant part of the land, another elder roamed, her heart hardened by betrayal and loss. Her name was Sarana, and her journey mirrored Eldur's in many ways. She too had been forced to endure unimaginable pain and had emerged stronger, her soul burning with the desire for retribution. Sarana moved through the night like a wraith, her eyes always searching for the next target, her heart yearning for a purpose beyond the cycle of violence. She had yet to find someone who could truly understand her, someone who could see beyond the monster she had become and recognize the wounded soul within. One day, the paths of Eldur and Sarana would cross. In a world filled with chaos and despair, their meeting would be a convergence of two powerful forces, both shaped by pain and loss. Together, they would navigate the treacherous landscape of their existence, their shared experiences, forming a bond that could transcend their individual suffering. Over time, as they fought side by side and learned to trust one another, Eldur and Sarana would discover that even elders, beings forged in pain, could find peace and happiness. Their journey would be fraught with challenges, but it would also be filled with moments of understanding and solace, a new beginning. And so, as Eldur continued on his path of vengeance, a new chapter awaited him, one that promised the possibility of redemption and companionship. The emptiness within him would one day be filled by another who knew the depths of his pain, and together they would find a way to heal. Coming soon, Eldur and Sarana, the final part in this 3-part saga. In this concluding chapter, witness the meeting of two souls bound by suffering and destiny. Follow their journey as they seek vengeance and ultimately find the peace and happiness that had long eluded them.